Welcome. This is an interview for the Missouri Veterans History Project. Today we're at Laclede Groves Retirement Center in St. Louis, Missouri. My name is Carl Sherman. I will be the interviewer. With me is Larry Balsamo, who is our videographer, and Carolyn Allpeter, who is the logger. We're interviewing today Robert E. Myers, who's a resident here. And first, Robert, can you start by telling us your date of birth and where you were born?
I was born in 1930, February 1st, 1930 in St. Louis, Missouri.
Very good. You were born in St. Louis. What part of St. Louis?
Well, I was born in maternity, St. Louis
Okay,
maternity.
no, I mean, do you live in South? Do you live in South City or?
No, I think they lived in city. I'm not sure exactly
Okay.
where. Well, yes, I do. They lived up on Parkland Place, which is north of Del Mar, almost in U City there.
Okay.
It's called Parkland Place.
Okay. What did your parents do? What did your father do, first of all?
My father was a surveyor. My family has been in surveying since actually about the time of the Revolution. So I'm about the 6th or 7th generation surveyor.
Was he a military man?
No.
Okay. Your mother?
My mother was from Rolla, Missouri. My dad was the Missouri School of Mines, and my mother grew up there. She met my husband and my father, and they got married.
Have any?
And I came along.
Okay. You have any other siblings?
Yeah, but I got a daughter. My sister. I have a sister. Yeah.
She's younger or older than you?
She's younger. She's 7 years younger than I am.
Very good. Okay. Your father was a surveyor. Where did you go to school in St. Louis?
Well, actually, I grew up in St. Louis, and it was during the Depression, and we moved from St. Louis to Rolla. My dad worked for the U.S. Geological Survey, and during the Depression, hard to get a job in those days. And then he got a job with the TVA, and we moved to Tennessee. So I started my schooling actually after the first grade in Chattanooga, Tennessee. And I was in Chattanooga, Tennessee until I was a sophomore in high school. And then we came back to St. Louis, and I went to Webster High. So I graduated from Webster High.
Okay. What'd you like best in high school? Any subjects you preferred?
Well, yeah, I was interested in chemistry and physics.
Okay. Did you play any ball?
In Chattanooga, I played football, but I came here in my junior, senior year. Didn't really get into athletics in high school, although I was a Sea Scout in the scouting program, and we did sailing, and we did sailboat racing. I learned to sail, and we raced up on Alton Lake.
You answered my question, Alton Lake, okay.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of places around here that you can do a lot of sailboating. Alton.
Yeah, at that time, that
Carlisle.
was really the only, yeah. Well, Carlisle was not even in existence
Oh, okay.
then. Yeah, that was actually my brother-in-law that started the Carlisle Sailing Association.
Oh, interesting,
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
I never been much of a sailor. I just knew the two places for interviews I've done. I know Carlisle. The name that most people talk about, they go to Carlisle now. I don't know if Alton's still that popular, but whatever. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
During school, did you have a summer job or did you work during school?
Oh yeah, I worked in surveying. But my father came back to work for my grandfather's firm. It was called Myers, Keller and Byers Company. It was an old line surveying company here in the city.
Still in business today?
Yes, not exactly, but yeah, to a certain extent it is.
Under that name or under a
No,
different
not
name
under
now?
that name. It's under Clayton Engineering.
Oh,
now.
I've seen that company. Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, he came back to get into the business there. So as a young high school guy, I worked in the field. I did surveying from 1946 on, every summer. in between.
After Webster Groves High School, you graduated. Did you go on to college?
Yes, I went to Washington University.
Okay.
And
Engineering school?
I got a degree in civil engineering, Washington University.
Okay. Then after that, what'd you do?
When I graduated, June of 1952, I went to work for a big consulting firm called Harner and Schifrin.
Still around?
Still around.
Architectural firm?
Yeah,
Okay.
engineering. Primarily hydraulics and hydrology and that sort of a thing, not architectural work very much. And I was a design engineer there, and I worked for them until September of '52. And my friends and neighbors decided I needed to go in the Army.
Okay.
And that's when I got inducted in the Army. So I worked there just from June until September.
Were you enlist? Did you enlist then?
No, I got drafted.
You got drafted.
Yeah, I had had a deferment up until that time just to go to
That's
school.
a change I got to make. Carolyn, note that I have him as enlisted on there.
Okay.
So you were drafted.
Yep, I was drafted.
Okay. Then where did you sworn in here in St. Louis?
Yes, right.
Probably at the Mart Building?
Yeah, at the Mart Building, yeah.
Two places were the Mart Building or Jefferson Barracks.
No,
one
it
of the
was the
two.
Mart Building. Got put on a train and shipped down to, it was kind of funny thing. My boss at Harner and Schifrin said, when you get to Fort Wood, he said, you'll go to Fort Wood. He said, when you go in there, go in and see the general, tell him that you worked for me. You know, that'd be really good if you can go to see the general.
They did a lot of work down. They did a lot of work in
Yeah, but I went directly to Camp Crowder. And
Camp
was
Crowder. Where's Camp Crowder?
Down near Neosho, Missouri, south. Camp Crowder, Neosho.
And near Joplin?
Yeah, near Joplin, right, south
Okay.
of Joplin. Yeah. And then I got put on a troop train. We didn't know where we were going. We ended up at Fort Bliss, Texas.
Wow.
So that's,
Did you able to go with any friends of yours, or you were by yourself?
no, there were I didn't know no one. I didn't know anybody. But it was kind of interesting. I had, in college at Washington University, I had been in the ROTC for a couple of years, and I decided to drop out. I didn't think it was my best. And so I ended up with the officers from Washington University, the guys I graduated, were the commanding officers at the training centers. He wasn't, my company battery wasn't a graduate, but some of the other guys were. So I had plenty of friends down there.
That's
They
good.
were officers, and I was a buck private.
They take advantage of you, or
No.
was that an advantage or a disadvantage to you?
It was. I don't think it was one way or the other. So
Okay.
it was always kind of
So
interesting.
you Camp Crowder, you were just there momentarily. Then.
Oh yeah, just enough
Just
to
to
get
catch
my,
a train,
get my
night
hair
train.
cut and get my shots, and away we went.
Fort Bliss is where?
What?
Where's Fort Bliss at? In Texas?
Texas, down El Paso, Texas.
Okay.
Yeah, down in the middle of the desert.
So how was basic training?
Oh, it was fine. You know, it was. We lived in little huts that were prisoner of war camp huts that the prisoners of war had lived in. They were little paper shacks, and it was pretty interesting. They used to always come in with their white gloves to see what was on what kind of dust and stuff like that. Well, down there, the dust came in everywhere, and there wasn't any grass, so it was always dusty. But when I went in there, I went in to see the first sergeant, and I said, "Sergeant, I'm a graduate civil engineer. I'm in the wrong place." I said, "You ought to send me to Fort Belvoir." And he says, "Forget it. You're scheduled to go to electronics school."
Okay.
So I went through basic and then ended up going to electronics school.
Anything sticks out in your life about basic training? I mean, did you find anything difficult, or was it were you good physical shape?
Well, I was in pretty good shape, yeah, actually a little
You were probably a little
I-
older. You were probably a little older than some of the
Oh,
some of the
yeah.
people. You haven't
Yeah,
being
yeah.
out of college.
I
you were,
was. I was the old guy. I used to have to tie their ties. They couldn't tie their ties, and I would tie their ties. And we had a group of fellows from Louisiana, from down around Baton Rouge, and then we had a group of people from up around Omaha. So we had those two things. Then there was a few of us that were kind of all over the place. We had a number of college graduates in our outfit. The other fellows, when they graduated, all went to Korea, and then a bunch of us stayed then. for
yeah,
a
you
long
were
time.
near the. You were in the middle, like in the middle of the Korean War, then, or towards the end of it. I
Yeah,
guess.
it was. It was
And
in
you
the
went
middle.
in,
They were still
and you were in
shooting.
September, so you were there in Fort Bliss in October, November. So it was weather wasn't too bad.
It was cold out there, but it
Okay.
was cold all the time in that desert. And it was hot during the day and cold as devil at night, even in the summer. Let's see what someone is going to say. Very interesting. I kind of began to kind of figure out what was going on in this volunteerism. We figured out they would have a call for a certain number of people for volunteering for things. And I used to think, oh, that looked like a guard duty. I think I'll volunteer for that. That's a pretty good deal. Volunteered that. We were going out to the 14-mile hike in that sand out to the desert range, and they called for volunteers, and I volunteered. So they put us on a truck, and we rode out there, and we put up the tents for the mess hall, and we filled sandbags. Well, it wasn't very hard to fill up the sandbags in the middle of the desert. Found out that every guy on that detail was a college graduate. Well, the fellows in my little hut, when they got out there and they saw I'd ridden out there, they were kind of ticked off at me, you know. I got out of walking all the way out there. And then when we went home, they asked for volunteers again. I volunteered again, rode home.
You were smart.
When I was sitting there in our little hut waiting for them to come home, they were really ticked that we'd figured out this.
What were you
system.
guarding against? Stupid question on my part, maybe. What were you guarding
No,
against? You're in the
just
middle of
it-
nowhere, it seems
no.
there. You're not near Mexico. You're not
No.
near anything.
No.
Just protection of the place, I guess.
Yeah,
Of the
right.
base.
Well, it was just an action of, set up a
train.
guard duty is what it amounted to.
Then when anybody steals those sandbags.
Right.
Yeah,
there you
that's
go.
right. Yeah. Well, so but we did it was kind of interesting. I then went to electronics school, and electronics school
In the same location?
It was at Fort Bliss. It was actually a school that was on contract with Philco. Philco had a contract to teach electronics, and it was essentially like a college level course in basic electronics and electronics, and it was really a very, very good course. I really enjoyed it and learned a lot from it. And then we trained on the fire control equipment for the anti-aircraft system. They had tried to get the Nike missile system working, but they had trouble getting the missile itself working. The missile kept blowing up, and they decided they better be ready, and so they adapted the fire control system to 90 millimeter and 120 millimeter anti-aircraft guns. So we had a long-range radar, and we had a tracking radar that would track the airplane or the target, and then we had a computer. It was actually not a digital computer we have today, it was an analog computer, and we then tracked the target and aimed the guns, and it fired the guns and the whole works. It was really
The
pretty,
Korean
pretty-
War is probably the less known war of anybody that they taught in school. Were the missiles actually used in Korea?
No, they never did get the Nike working.
Yeah, I've taken a further course at Washington U, lifetime learning about in the Korean War. I took an 8-week course, and I never mentioned everybody about a missile.
No, they
All
were-
they talk about was the cold.
Yeah.
The horrible
Well,
conditions.
they tried to get the missile working and they couldn't do it. The missile was not up to snuff, and so they adapted to the battery. And that's what I learned was the fire control and the computer and the radar and all that. So I fixed that.
So your days at Fort Bliss were mainly in school then?
Yeah, mainly. In fact, I was in school up until the last 6 months of my tour. So I was there a long time. Actually, we had during the middle of my tour, the summer before I graduated, they held our classes, and we worked on an experimental bomb that was actually, we found out later, that was actually the neutron bomb. They dropped it on us out in the desert, and we went out and set up sites out in the desert and tracked the trajectory of that bomb coming out of the airplane. And the day they actually dropped the big bomb, we watched them take off up in Holloman Air Force Base up in, was it Phoenix, I believe, was up there, and they brought the bomb down. We watched them come in and they dropped this huge bomb.
Was it radio? Was it radioactive, or was it
No, it was
fallout?
just, it was not, it wasn't loaded with it was probably had the right weight, but it was just a shape and thing. It had a chute on it. And then we went out and had to find it out there in the desert. It was really interesting. But they were trying to perfect the trajectory of the bomb for the bombardier.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So then you showed us a picture before we started the interview. From Fort Bliss, you got stationed again then?
Yeah, I got after I graduated, and was sent first to Coney Island. Actually, I didn't know where I was. I was assigned to a National Guard outfit, and got off the airplane in LaGuardia, and I called this number I was supposed to call, and they said, well, we'll have some guy come by and pick you up. So I waited, and they came by and said, where are we going? He said, we're going to Coney Island. I said, wow. So we had an anti-aircraft at Coney Island, an anti-aircraft gun, 90 millimeter battery. And then we had, in that battalion, we had a battery at Far Rockaway Beach, and we had one at Floyd Bennett Field, and we had one up in Jamaica, Long Island.
Was the I didn't mean to interrupt you. Was the Coney Island still an active amusement?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we just had a little part of a block there where we actually had the anti-aircraft guns all set up and our unit set. So if an aircraft had come over, we'd have been shooting at them.
In the meantime,
Did anybody come?
you watched the Ferris wheel go round and round. Huh?
Yep. Right.
Interesting.
It was it was a very interesting place because it was an Italian neighborhood, and they invited us to the church and all the festivities. They liked soldiers. They didn't like the sailors, but they liked the soldiers.
Interesting.
So we really had a good time.
So you lived in a barrack somewhere?
Yeah, we had barracks there. Yeah.
That was good duty. in New
Well,
York
it was
City.
a good duty, and we would go up to Manhattan and take the subway. The subway was just a block away, and go up there and get tickets at the USO and then go to the shows and things like that. It was pretty nice.
Well, you couldn't have planned it better than that.
No, it was really good. And then, of course, we would go, during that summer, we went out to Montauk Point to test our training. So we would set up out there and set our whole battalion up on the beach above the ocean, and we would fire they would bring an airplane across with a sleeve on it, and we would chop off the sleeve. We would shoot the sleeve. One of the times they had a young officer in one of the battalions that must have done something wrong, and the sleeve was about 1,000 yards behind the airplane, and when they started firing, all the bursts were coming 1,000 yards behind the sleeve. And I guess the guy in the airplane decided if he's 1,000 yards behind this time, he ought to be 1,000 yards ahead of next time. And it's going to ring right in the airplane. The sleeve dropped, it fell off, and he went home. He didn't come back that day.
Little lack of trust there, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, he'd done something wrong. I don't know what it was, but it was pretty neat.
Now, a question I forgot to ask earlier. Were you single at this time, or were you married?
Yeah, I was single.
Oh,
Yeah.
you're single, okay. That made life a little easier, too.
Yeah, right, yeah. Yeah, it was pretty nice duty.
So you said earlier you were, but 3/4 of the time you were in
Training.
Texas, and then the last fourth of your career you were in New York.
Yeah, right.
You got discharged from there.
I was got discharged from.
In the war, so you were served till September '54. The war was over with, and
No, I think the war was still going on. I think, wasn't it?
I think the major fighting stopped.
Well, the major fighting
it
had
stopped in
stopped,
50. Yeah, theoretically we're still at war.
Yeah.
This I found out in this course I took that there was a peace treaty signed or truce sign was broken the next day, and we're still at war with North
Yeah.
Korea. Although we never went to war, it was the U.S.
Yeah.
It was
It
the
was a
first United
police
States
action.
police action. So the United States never declared war on North Korea.
Yeah.
But I was corrected in an interview with that. That I asked the question, well, what did you do when the Korean War ended? And he
Yeah.
said the Korean War never ended. It never really started.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's a little known fact. But
Yeah.
I learned from doing interviews. So then you come home. You came back to St. Louis.
Yeah, I came back to St. Louis. Back to my job at Horn and
Okay.
Schifrin.
Big party waiting for you.
No, not really. Well, it was a lot of us came back. It was just a good deal to actually come back.
So you were fortunate. You already graduated college, and you were able to go back to the job.
Yeah, it worked. I did design work for Horn and Schifrin. I worked myself up to be a junior partner, and then went into work one Saturday. We worked half a day Saturday. Went in, and the big boss, Mr. Horner, called me in. He said, I've been talking to your grandfather who ran Myers, Keller and Byers, the old surveying company. He said, and you're fired. And I said, what do you mean? He says, your grandfather wants you back in the business. He said, you're fired. So I went back into surveying, but I got a good background from Horn and Schifrin in a big consulting firm, working with a big consulting firm, getting a lot of really good information and design. It was a good way to learn the design phase. I did reinforced concrete design, did hydrology, hydraulics.
Okay. After you got out of the service, did you stay in touch with a lot of the guys you served with?
No, they really didn't. Don't know of any of those fellows that they were, like I say, they were from up in Omaha area and then from down in Louisiana. And the fellows that I went to electronics school with, I don't really know whatever happened. Well, one of them I do, but that's not really. I didn't. We were all over. One of my classmates was a Fulbright scholar. He lived in Texas. One was a lawyer from Chicago. It was a really interesting electronics school. They weren't regular Army. We had a couple of regular Army people, but it was almost all college graduates and various degrees. The guy who was a lawyer he had missed passing the bar, and they drafted him. So that's how he got in. The fellow was a Fulbright scholar, was an English major. So he was, in fact, I think he was was a top guy in our class
Interesting.
in electronics.
You had a more than average educated unit.
Yeah.
Did you get involved with American Legion or any of the veterans organizations?
No, I was running companies and things like that. I just never, I was very active in the professional areas, but not in veterans affairs.
A lot of the questions here relate to your combat experience, which you didn't.
Well,
Montauk, New York is a nice place to be stationed.
yeah, yeah, yeah. If that was combat, I was in really good shape.
So did you ever get married?
Yep, yep. Yeah, I got married when I came back and was here a couple of years ago. I met a girl I'd gone to high school with.
Oh, interesting.
And so we got married in 1959.
Okay, so you're back 5 years.
Yeah, yeah.
Have children?
Yep, I have 4 kids, 3 boys and a girl. My oldest son lives in Germany now. He's an electrical engineer, graduate of Washington University. And my daughter is a mechanical engineer. She graduated from Rolla. And she lives in Denver, Erie, Colorado, which is just north of Denver. She's not doing engineering now. She's a home engineer, but she does some engineering. And then I've got a son who lives in Lee Summit, who is an engineer as well. He's an electronics engineer. And then I have another son who has had a brain tumor, and he lives here with me. He doesn't live with me. He's in the convalescent center. So being here, I can visit him. It's really nice because I visit with him at least once a day. And
That's great.
It
But
was really-
you got 3 engineers.
yeah, 3
All
engineers.
either went to Rolla, all went to Rolla, or
Well, my oldest son went to Washington University.
Washington.
Yeah.
Active in alumni associations there. I would think your family would be a big target for the engineering school there.
Yeah. Yeah. I
A friendly
got-
target, I should say.
Huh?
I should say a friendly target for
Yeah,
you.
well, I got one of their awards here a couple of
Very
years
good.
ago. Yeah, I got the Alumni Achievement Award a couple of years ago. So,
You say, go ahead.
I was going to say, my family has been in surveying for years and years. I've always been very active, and when I was in college, we were active as a member of the Engineers Club here and the AS, American Society of Civil Engineers. And then I became an active member in the American Congress on Surveying and Mapping, which is the national organization. And then the Missouri Society of Professional Surveyors. And I was active in that and with my surveying company. And my father passed away in 1951, so I actually went into the firm, and my grandfather then passed away, and I ended up to be the owner of the Myers, Keller and Byers surveying company.
They still use that name today? Or is
No,
it's been
no,
blended into
they
Clayton Survey?
bought, actually, finish my story here a little
Okay, I
bit.
didn't
You're
mean to interrupt
kind of
you.
bringing you up to date.
I didn't mean to
So,
interrupt
yeah,
you.
right. A man in Rolla, Missouri, came up with the idea that we needed to do something to perpetuate the public land survey system. And the public land survey thing is the system that all of our boundaries are tied to. It's the monumentation. It started a major survey of the state of Missouri in 1815, was finished in the 1850s. And that system was kind of falling apart on the ground, and so they came up with the idea we needed to have a state agency to bring that up. And I helped promote that as president of the professional society. And after about 5 years of going through the legislature, it was passed. And then they came to me and said, you've been selling this thing to us. We want you to be the state surveyor and be in charge of it. And so I had written in the legislation that the state surveyor could have no outside interest, particularly in a private business. So when I decided to join and be the state surveyor, I had to sell my business. So I sold my business then, that's Myers, Keller and Byers, to Clayton Surveying at that time. And that's how I got away from that. We then formed the business. The actual Land Survey Authority was the name of it at that time in 1971 is when we were first funded in 71. And we were located in Rolla. The agency's still there. I was the first Missouri state surveyor then. And we set up a program. It's a pretty unique program. We set standards for surveying, all the standards for the quality of surveying. We developed a repository of all the surveys that have ever been made in the state of Missouri on microfilm. Now it's digital. So if you want to know if you've got a survey on your property, you can call down there, give them the legal description. They will tell you what survey, and they also then would make a copy of it for you.
Well, that's wild.
For about $1. It's kind of, and we also, of course, when we first started, there was no GPS, and we were the first agency then to begin to use GPS, and we put in what we call horizontal vertical control using, we were trying to do it with the old methods, and then when GPS came in, we started using GPS, and we put in horizontal vertical control over the state using GPS. We were by far ahead of anybody else in the state at that time. So
Did you blend in at all with any of the military? Any military uses of the survey, like the mapping agency here?
no, they were
I'm
not too much. Fort Leonard Wood had a problem where they didn't know where their boundaries were. So they decided that they would have the military do it, and when the military took a look at it, they said, we don't know how to do this. So they contracted with us, and we actually then in turn contracted with people, and we put in the boundaries for the Fort Leonard Wood.
So now they know where.
Now they know where the boundaries are. Found a lot of encroachments. People had built on them. They didn't know they were building on military.
And the Fork didn't know it either.
No, they didn't know.
Military didn't
No,
know.
they didn't have any idea. So
Other states have organizations like yours, or
they followed us.
you were the
We-
pioneer state? Huh?
Yeah, we were a pioneer state. Yeah, there are a couple of them have followed us. It's kind of been mixed because of the money involved. We came up with a unique idea to have a $1 fee collected on every recording of a document because it uses our public land survey. So every time you record a deed, they collect an extra $1, and that $1 goes into a fund which is the source of the revenue for this agency. And that's pretty unique to Missouri. The other agencies in the other states have never really quite gotten to that level, and so they have a little more trouble.
But you would have like a subdivision. You would have every house in there.
Yes,
Well, I got to talk to you after the interview.
yeah.
I'm trustee of our subdivision. The tree fell. The storm on the common. We don't know if it's on the common ground or if it's one house or the next to the house next to it. We're fighting on who pays for removal of the tree. And I made a solution. Let's split it a third. One house, the second house, and the subdivision association would pay. But you may answer a question because one of my other trustees, an attorney, and he's been to Clayton, and nobody knows where the boundaries are. Nobody
You may
has.
need a survey, actually.
Yeah, well, it's not worth it. that will cost as much as it is
Yeah, well, I can take a look
to
at
move
it.
the tree. But I didn't mean to digress, but that's a great,
Yeah.
I didn't know that stuff was, I'll have to tell my,
Yeah, well, a lot of people don't know it.
yeah.
Yeah, attorneys don't know it. That's one of my jobs. I just go around telling people about what's going on. I also was on the Missouri Boundary Commission with our dispute with Nebraska. A lot of people don't know we had a big, long fight with Nebraska.
Who won?
Well, I'd say we really won eventually. We finally put the boundary back in the river. Took almost 50 years.
Wow.
50 years they were claiming land on our side of the river, and people were paying taxes in both states, or they would lose their property.
Wow.
And I came up with the idea that, well, we're not doing that over in Nebraska. Let's put a little bit of Nebraska land on Missouri. And I figured out where I wanted to put it on, and we put it on. And then I went over to look and see what was there. And the Cooper Nuclear Station, which is the nuclear reactor for Nebraska, we just put it in Missouri. And that finally made it work. They wanted to put it in the river.
Wow.
So, but we had a long fight with the Nebraska. You know, they have a unicameral legislature, and the unicameral legislature is really controlled by a senator who's in that area. Could never convince the senator
To give up the land.
to give up anything, and so, and I think we're probably some other shenanigans that get us there, but when the Nebraska Power Commission found out that they were losing not all of their reactor, but part of it, well, they said, look, you got to settle this thing. So we settled it with Nebraska and Missouri, and then it went to Congress, and Congress then finally passed it.
Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah,
When did this take place?
well, I retired in '97, so it was, actually the final was actually after I retired, was about 98, 99. And it started back in the, well, actually started when Nebraska became a state. It's a long story. You know what? We could use a whole, it's been there for quite a while.
So who claims to be the winner?
But it's brand new.
Okay.
But I mean, really.
Who claims to be the winner of this dispute? Both people say Missouri and both say the
Yeah,
winner.
well, there was a time when there's an island up there, or it doesn't look like an island, but it was an oxbow that was cut off, and it's on the Missouri side, and it actually is in Nebraska, so it's a big tract of land. It's like Kaskaskia here, and it's on the Nebraska, it's on the Missouri side, and the Missouri legislature always threatened to take that back, and so we didn't do that. We left that where it was, so that line still is there, but we did move the rest of the boundary into the river outside of, so the land was not in dispute. Used to always say if you wanted to have a murder committed and you want to do something, that's where you want to take somebody.
jurisdiction?
Because you didn't know where the jurisdiction was. It was like the Fort Wood thing, where the Fort Wood problem was they had a murder down there and they didn't know who had jurisdiction, whether it was on the fort or on the private property or state property. So he had to have a survey to find out whether it was military jurisdiction or not.
Wow, things you never would think of.
Yeah, that's right.
You think a state boundary for, would be fairly well documented and determined or whatever.
Well, Missouri has more boundaries with more states
'cause-
than any other state, and most of them have large river boundaries.
Okay.
The river boundary the law is very different, and it depends upon the movement of the river and how the river moved. And then when the Corps came in and put revetments in and changed the Corps, it fixes the boundary at that point, called an avulsion is what they call it. And so it makes difficult. We had disputes with Tennessee, with Illinois. We get way off on base here.
Okay, that's all right. So we're all very
You have to
interested.
edit this out. but it's very, very fascinating.
Yeah, it is.
You know, the boundary with Kansas at St. Joe, the airfield over there, is actually on the Kansas side of the river. So you have to go into Kansas to get to St. Joe's airfield, which is in Missouri, but it's over on that side of on the Kansas side, and they let that thing get out of hand, and we went in there and straightened that out too. That's why the Sand Land Survey Authority was very important.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Never knew these. But you think this is a big cut and dry thing, and it's all decided, but no such thing.
So did when you went into the service and they trained you in electrical, basically, did that help you out at all in your future life after?
Oh
you
yeah, it did. Actually, when I started back with Horner and Schifrin, one of the projects I worked on was Blytheville Air Force Base, and they were bringing the old Air Force Base up to be a SAC base, and I did all the electrical design for my electronics in the Army. They always said, my boss said when he took the plans to the Corps of Engineers down in Little Rock, they said, "That was the best set of electrical plans we ever had." He said, "I didn't tell him it was done by a civil engineer."
So your military experience helped you in your later life.
Yeah. And then, of course, with the electronics you got today with the computers. Yeah. So I made use of my electronics. Still do, in fact.
So what lessons did you learn by being in the military?
A lot. It was good. The military, that training I had, the electronics was very, very good. It was, like I said, was a civilian school. It was like going to college again. And of course, I'd just gotten out of college, so it was really pretty nice. It wasn't. It was a little bit difficult for some of the old sergeants that were in our class. They hadn't been they maybe just graduated from high school, and they had not been in school for a long time, so they had some pretty tough times, particularly competing with us, a bunch of college graduates that were in there.
It's interesting.
So when you came out, what rank were you?
Well, there was no rank when we were in school, so I was a buck private when I finally graduated after a year and a half. And when I got transferred to New York, I got to be a PFC. And you had to have time and grade to be anything else. My MOS called for a master sergeant. So I was finally, they put in for a waiver, and I made corporal while I was in there, when I was up in New York. So it was kind of funny. I had a Jeep was assigned to me, and because I was supposed to be a master sergeant, I had a driver. My driver was a master sergeant.
You reversed the
and he said, "Myers, it don't look right. Me driving you." He said, "You drive, I'll ride in the back."
You had a reverse chain of command.
Yeah. So, and so finally that he just quit going with me. But so I just had my own Jeep.
That's a funny story.
Yeah, that was really kind of crazy. But
Any other great military reflections you want to tell us?
no, I think my training in the military was good. I think it's important that you get away and you learn things. I lived at home when I went to Washington University. Didn't go away to school. Washington University at that time was a streetcar school.
Wow.
I lived in Webster Groves, rode the streetcar down to the Maplewood, got on the city limits line, went over there back and forth all the time. And so we learned that was the first time. Well, I'd been away a little bit before when I was in high school, So it was a good experience, and I wouldn't I'd make any money, but I got a lot of good experience.
Yes,
In fact, I had some of these officers that were my Wars University buddies said, we wish we could do the education that you've had in this fire control system. They won't let us learn the details that you learned. You got in and got the nitty gritty of the thing. All they tell us is if we got a problem, call the mechanic. Yeah.
Interesting.
And I got to be the mechanic.
So you were very fortunate that your military enhanced your later life career.
Yeah, right.
That's a rare story we hear doing interviews.
Yeah.
Usually people are completely different what they
Yeah.
know about.
No,
Interesting.
Well, of course, my civil engineering, my surveying, I didn't do that in the military. If I had gone to the Corps of Engineers, I would have used more, and I probably would have been trained a little differently.
So what do you do to stay busy here?
Well, I'm into a little everything around here,
Okay.
but I'm into computers still, and we have a Wii bowling league, and I've written a program now that we handicap the bowling, and we have 22 teams, and we handicap those, and I do all the handicapping. It's all on a computer, and give that out. We have a database that we use for visits, and I've written a program that manages that database, and I'm learning a new program called Access, which is a database program, and I'm rewriting that. We have shuffleboard here, and I do the computer's work on it. I'm the treasurer of one of the organizations here. I got plenty to do. I keep myself busy. My wife and I came in here almost 4 years ago now. My wife was tired a lot and didn't know what was wrong, and all of a sudden took her in, and they operated on her and found out she had pancreatic cancer, and she lasted a week after the operation. So she's been gone now for 3 years. So, but I keep myself busy.
Sounds great.
There's lots to do here. It's a great people here. This is really a nice facility. I continually tell my people that, hey, think about coming into a place like this. There are a lot of good facilities. I lived in Rolla 40 years with out in the country, and I got to the point where cutting the grass and all that stuff got to be old hat. Come here, I don't have to worry about that. I was in Kiwanis down there. I've been in Kiwanis since I think some 75 I joined Kiwanis. Came here and joined a Kiwanis club here. We're down, meet on the hill. And so I'm back in Kiwanis and active there too.
Stay active. Sounds great.
Yeah, it's fun.
That's great. Anybody else have any questions? You've been a great interview. We all learned
Thank you.
something we never knew about the state boundaries and everything else. That's
Yeah,
interesting.
that's fun.
Thank you.
Thank you. Enjoy it. Thank you very much for this.